What is up, guys? Welcome to another Bopcast episode, and this is our second fantasy episode of the week, and we're going to be doing wide receiver matchups for every single game. We're going to give you the best advice out there. You can trust that. Last week, our wide receiver picks, our top five wide receiver starts: Corey Davis, Brandon Ayuk, who was it? Hilton, Russell Gage, and I can't remember who the last person was, but the average point total in half PPR was 15.42, which is pretty insane. I'd say those are really great picks, especially once you consider those picks are not must starts, obvious picks like Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, those type of players. So if you're looking for wide receiver advice, look no further. This video will give you everything you need to know. And we're going to start it off with the Friday matchup. We have the Saints and the Vikings. And I'll start it off on the Vikings side. I think it's pretty similar to what you do all year. I know the Saints cornerbacks Lattimore and I'm forgetting his name right now, but they've been pretty solid of late. They started off pretty shaky. I think Marcus Williams is who I was thinking of, and they've been playing better recently. I would still start Adam Thielen and Jefferson with confidence as wide receiver twos. I wouldn't trust them at wide receiver one. But obviously they've been getting volume this entire season. The Vikings, I believe, are a number five offense in terms of yardage per game, and the Saints will put up points. I know Michael Thomas is out, but they'll put up points no matter what. They're a great offense, and so the Vikings should be chasing them. And I would start both of them wide receiver two, no questions asked. On the flip side, Michael Thomas is out again on IR. Wouldn't start Traquan Smith or Humphrey or I don't even know if there's any other wide receivers, but Emmanuel Sanders is interesting because he didn't have a great game last week. We thought he was a sit, and he had I believe one big catch of like 50 yards or 40 yards, something like that. But on the whole, um, the Vikings defense is obviously a much better matchup than the Chiefs because of Breland. And I would say start Sanders. I would honestly start Sanders as a flex, I would say solid flex matchup, and maybe even a wide receiver two. I'd say a low end wide receiver two and a flex. Um, and Now let's move on to the Buccaneers Lions game. Arjun, I'm going to turn it over to you because there's a lot of wide receivers in this game, especially on the Buccaneers side that you could play.
If I had to pick the best wide receiver to play in this game, it would still be Mike Evans. Um, but I think any of the Bucks three receivers, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown, are all pretty good starts in this week, given how bad, terrible the Lions defense. It's not going to look good. It is absolutely terrible. Um, And given the caliber of these three receivers, you're going to be looking at some very extremely lost cornerbacks, like trying to they're going to be lost. They're going to be gone. And Mike Evans is a start, I'd say, as a wide receiver too, only because um, he's probably a low end wide receiver one, high end wide receiver two, just because volume may not be there in this game where they will probably be killing the Lions. Uh, Even with how inconsistent the Bucks have been playing, I'd still think they're going to easily win this game. And so I'd give him a low end wide receiver one, high end wide receiver two. Chris Godwin probably has the harder of the cornerback matchups with Coleman, but even then, it's Chris Godwin. He's a very good receiver, and that won't take away from anything. He's still a pretty good wide receiver two start. Antonio Brown in recent weeks, if you've looked last week, even though he had his great game, his snap count dipped tremendously, and that is kind of concerning. However, he did get, I think, the tied for the most targets on the team, which is surprising given that low snap count. So now, given the he has to go against Amani Owarie, is that his name? that is an extremely easy matchup for Antonio Brown, and he could absolutely toast this guy. He could have a Will Fuller like day of like 450 and 2 touchdowns, but
Toast him.
or he could have a floor of like 5 for 45, which is definitely possible given his low snap count and he has the volatility. So if you're looking for a very high upside flex play, there isn't much higher than Antonio Brown this week.
For sure.
And then we'll go on to the Lions. Looks like so Kenny Galladay isn't playing. So Marvin Jones is again the wide receiver one, and Bucks have been pretty suspect against wide receivers. So I'd start him as a solid wide receiver two this week. I wouldn't trust any of the other receivers on the Lions given that it is volatile. Sanu and Amendola are not guys I would consider starting with confidence at all. I would only start Marvin Jones.
Right. And Marvin Jones had a fantastic game last week. So yeah, I think Marvin Jones is a solid wide receiver to start. Moving on to the next matchup, we have the 49ers and the Cardinals. On the 49ers side, Deebo Samuel is out again. I don't know if he's on IR, so I don't know if he'll be back next week. But this week he's out. Brandon Ayuk, another fantastic game last week. We predicted he'd have a great game. He was a top 5 must start for us this week. I don't know if he's a top 5 must starts, but he is a start, very solid start for me. Very solid wide receiver 2 with maybe wide receiver 1 upside. Considering the targets he gets, the ability he has to run after the catch, he's a yak boy through and through, and so he has been one of the quietest, most consistent wide receivers this entire season. I think him and Corey Davis have been very quietly consistent this entire season, and so I would trust him totally against the Cardinals. I don't think the Cardinals have been amazing against wide receivers this entire season. So I would say start IU confidently at wide receiver 2. On the Cardinals side, I don't know if you trust Christian Kirk. Definitely wouldn't trust Fitzgerald. Christian Kirk's a bit of an enigma because his target's kind of very week to week, and a lot of it is dependent on how Kyler Murray is going to play. And the 49ers still have a very decent defense, all things considered. Hopkins will have to go up against Sherman, I believe, or even their other corners are pretty good as well. I would still Hopkins is a no-brainer. Doesn't matter who you're playing, you start Hopkins. So very simple game to call here. And then next we have the Dolphins and the Raiders.
And so for the Dolphins and Raiders, I would start Devontae Parker. If Devontae Parker is active, I would start him as a low end. Actually, even if he's active, even he could be somewhat injured, I would start him as a mid wide receiver too, just because of how bad the Raiders defense is. Anyone else, you could, if the guy is out, I would consider starting
Jakeem Grant maybe might be
Jakeem Grant is a guy I would consider starting if Parker is out, given the amount of injuries they have. Someone has to get the ball. And with this Raiders defense being as bad as it is, someone will go off. And if Parker's out, Jakeem Grant is a pretty good start, I'd say, as like a flex with very high upside. As for the Raiders, I don't know anyone I'd be confident starting in. Maybe
Ruggs
Aguilar.
So yeah, Ruggs is out. Yeah.
I would only be considering starting Aguilar. He would be the only guy I would be comfortable starting at wide receiver, given Waller gets too many of the targets from Carr and Mariota to be for anyone else to have a decent volume. So Aguilar is probably the only other guy, and everyone else is iffy. Renfro is extremely, extremely desperate, but there are much better options out there.
Right. And then since Ruggs is out, Aguilar is probably going to be going against Xavier Howard, who's been one of the best defensive players in the league. And if Mariota does end up playing, his favorite target is Waller by far. So I agree. I would sit all of the Raiders receivers this week. No question in my mind. And then we move on to the Panthers and the Redskins. And here, on the Panthers side, they have this triplet of wide receivers and DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, and Curtis Samuel. Every week, it's like what different wide receiver goes off. Last week, we saw DJ Moore go off. I think we knew Robbie Anderson would struggle because of the matchup against Green Bay. Um, this week, they're going up against the Redskins, who have been pretty stingy on defense. I don't know if I'd be comfortable starting. Um, I would say all three of them to me are even DJ Moore is kind of a flex to low end wide receiver two play. Curtis Samuel, especially, I wouldn't trust anywhere except flex maybe. Same with Robbie Anderson. Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore have been getting more targets on the whole, but it's a terrible matchup. I would feel again comfortable starting him at flex. And DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson maybe at low end wide receiver two. Personally, it's not a great matchup. And if you're desperate at wide receiver two, I think there are better options that we'll get into later. But if you don't have any of them, then yeah, it's okay to start them at wide receiver two. But on the Redskins, I think it's pretty easy. There's only one wide receiver worth starting, and that's Terry McLaurin, and he is an every week must start no matter what. And the Panthers defense has been very suspect. Hammer Terry McLaurin, forget about Sims, both the Sims, Isaiah Wright, whoever's on the Redskins. I think that's pretty simple. And then next game we have the Colts versus the Steelers. And the Steelers have been struggling. Colts offenses look good. Who do you like?
So for the Colts, T.Y. Hilton has been looking pretty good the last 4 weeks now. So I would say I would start him as I would start him as a wide receiver two, low end wide receiver two / flex with upside to be even more, given how much the Steelers defense has struggled in recent weeks. Uh, Anyone else? Zach Pascal had looked pretty good last week. He's got a lot of targets, but he is very volatile. Don't consider him. Michael Pittman has kind of disappeared after his two breakout games. So other than T.Y. Hilton, I wouldn't be confident starting anyone else on the Colts. As for the Steelers, it's all up in the air. Deontay Johnson's the only surefire probable starter. He's probably like a low end wide receiver too, given the amount of targets he gets. As for Juju, he just doesn't get targets. I'm not confident ever starting Juju anymore. Claypool is a big play, so is a big play threat. So if you're desperate, he does have touchdown upside that the other two do not. So he could break out and have a very good game, but that's also a risky play, I'd say.
Yeah. So I think if we had to go ranking wise, Deontay Johnson, Claypool, and then Juju. Like Juju is even a risky flex play given how inconsistent he is. And it's the Colts defense. I just don't know if I'd be confident starting Juju. But at flex, I think he is a better play than, for example, I don't know, Robbie Anderson or something maybe. Or
Juju's too
it's
busy
debatable.
dancing on logos to be good at football. So
Yeah, he's gonna stop though. I think Mike Tomlin made him stop. Hey, maybe that means he'll break out. Who knows? Um, Next game we have the Falcons versus the Chiefs, and then so here is an interesting one because Julio Jones is out again. Ridley and Russell Gage both had pretty great games against the Buccaneers last week. Um, Personally, Ridley I think is going to get the harder matchup, but I still don't see how you could sit Ridley with the way he's been playing. I would start him as a wide receiver two. I don't know if he'll hit the wide receiver one numbers that he's accustomed to putting up, but as a wide receiver two, I could see him doing okay. Russell Gage, same thing. He's going to get a much easier cornerback matchup. So yeah, I think Russell Gage, Ridley are both wide receiver twos, especially if you consider they'll be playing from behind almost certainly. Um, so they'll get volume. And then on the flip side, Tyreek Hill obviously every week must start. Doesn't matter who you're playing, and it's the Falcons secondary. So he might have another 50-point game. Who knows? And then the other Chiefs receivers are a little bit weird in that Mahomes likes to pick and choose. But overall, I think if you're desperate, you could really go with you know any three of them at flex would be kind of desperate. I think Sammy Watkins is probably a more surefire play than the other two. I think Watkins and Hardman are probably a little bit more surefire than Robinson. But it is the Falcons defense, and all three of them have great upside. Personally, I would start Sammy Watkins or Hardman at flex. Wide receiver two is a little bit too much for me, but at flex, I think they're great plays. And the next matchup we got Chicago and Jacksonville. Interesting one.
So for Chicago, the only person I'd start is Allen Robinson. He's a wide receiver one. He's a bona fide wide receiver one. In this matchup, easy matchup against Jacksonville, you're starting him as a wide receiver one, and you've probably been starting him the whole year. He's a QB independent, matchup independent wide receiver. Doesn't matter. He's very good. As for Darnell Mooney, he's kind of he's iffy, but I would say he's desperate, and I wouldn't trust him. It's iffy as to whether or not he will get the targets and be able to put up the numbers that he was able to put in some of his boom weeks this year. Then moving on to the Jaguars, the only person there isn't anyone actually I would consider to start. Like, they're all extremely inconsistent. I think the most consistent of them is Keelan Cole, and even him I would not start against his Bears defense. Like, there isn't a single receiver I would start on the Jaguars against this Bears defense.
Sit them all, baby. I don't trust any of them, especially if you're in the finals. They're gonna let you down, and you're gonna be sad. So don't start them, please. And next matchup we have the Bengals and the Texans. Bengals have been kind of an enigma because they have three very capable wide receivers, and while Joe Burrow was playing, T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd were both fantastic. T. Higgins was basically a wide receiver two, mid to high end wide receiver two. Tyler Boyd was same, if not a wide receiver one. And then when Burrow went down, obviously shit hit the fan. And they are going up against a not so great defense. Personally, I would feel comfortable playing. I think for whether it's Ryan Finley or whoever is playing, I think whoever they're more comfortable with T. Higgins for some reason because he's a big target. I don't know, but I would feel more comfortable, weirdly enough, playing T. Higgins at flex over Tyler Boyd. I don't think either of them are attractive enough to say they're a wide receiver two for me. They'd both be very risky. So, but at flex, I think you wouldn't be doing too bad. On the Texans side, another interesting one because Cooks is probably going to get the most targets, but Deshaun Watson likes to spread it around. Chad Hansen also gets a lot of targets. QD seems to be the one catching the touchdowns, or at least he's caught, I think, 2 or 3 touchdowns in the past 3 weeks. So if I had to start people out of the Texans, first I wouldn't feel that comfortable starting them anything above a flex, which might be kind of harsh. But if you're in the championship game, I really would be suspect starting Brandon Cooks or QD, especially Hansen at wide receiver 2, with the way that Deshaun Watson spreads around the ball. But at flex, I think they're all three of them are decent flex plays. Cooks and Cutie, especially, I think are great flex plays. Hansen, I think, is a kind of underrated flex play because he actually does get a decent amount of targets every week, and it is the Bengals. So I think Cooks is the only one where you could say maybe he's a low end wide receiver too. But all in all, I wouldn't feel too comfortable starting any of them at wide receiver too. Um, Next game we have the Giants and the Ravens.
So I don't think I need to go over any of the Giants receivers. I wouldn't start. I wouldn't be comfortable starting any of them, especially if Colt McCoy is playing. Um, you could, yeah, I really wouldn't. Even though I think Jimmy Smith and who else is out? One more guy is out for them. Yeah, Jimmy Smith and Marcus Peters are both out and projected to be out. So even though they're both are potentially going to be out, I still wouldn't be comfortable starting any of the Giants receivers. They're too volatile, and uh, yeah, in a championship game, you do not want extreme boom or bust like that. As for the Ravens receivers, Marquise Brown is going to be drawing James Bradbury as the wide receiver one, I'm pretty sure. So I wouldn't start him. He's probably a flex given he's a wide receiver one, but all the Ravens receivers have never been that good this year. So I wouldn't even be comfortable starting any of them either. Marquise Brown at most as a flex. So all in all, this whole batch, the
Yeah,
whole game, none of the receivers are that enticing.
yeah. I mean, this is an entire game of dud wide receivers. Don't start any of them if you're in a championship game. And yeah, maybe start Hollywood Brown at flex. Even that is risky given the matchup he's going to be drawing. Um, yeah, screw that game. The next game we have the Browns and the Jets. On the Browns side, I think Landry is a must start, obviously, given the matchup and the targets. Rashard Higgins is a low key start, in my opinion. I think Rashard Higgins is a fine flex start, if not a high end flex start. And if you're desperate, hopefully not. I would doubt it if you're in the championship, but um, I could see him being a low end wide receiver too. Depending on the targets he gets if he catches a touchdown, I could see that happening. On the Jets side, it's a little bit suspect. I don't know if I feel comfortable starting any of them. If I had to choose, I think maybe Crowder is a flex play. Certainly wouldn't feel comfortable starting him at wide receiver too. And even at flex, it's a very, I don't know, the Jets are very up and down. Um, I don't see Crowder as a low end or maybe a mid flex to low end flex, if I'm being honest. And everyone else is a sit. Mims, Donovan Peoples Jones, whoever you have in this matchup is a sit. Um, and then the next matchup we have the Broncos and the Chargers.
So as for the Broncos, they are going to be matched up against two very good corners in Chris Harris and Casey Hayward, and I'm not comfortable starting Jerry Jeudy or Tim Patrick in this matchup. Those are probably the only two startable wide receivers on the Broncos, with Tim Patrick getting touchdowns and Jerry Jeudy getting more targets. Um, Jerry Jeudy probably won't get Casey Hayward, but even then, I don't trust Drew Lock enough to uh, be the guy to give him the ball extremely consistently. His I think the stat was like his percent of catchable attempts is like 55%. So I don't trust Drew Lock at all. And in the championship matchup, he's probably at best a flex. It's hard to trust him. He's a good receiver, but it's hard to trust Drew Lock. As for the Chargers, Keenan Allen, I think, is a wide receiver one if he plays. This is
Yep.
a terrible Broncos secondary now, given the injuries and the amount of people that are out. Mike Williams is a flex. Gatton is probably a sit. Tyron Johnson's a sit. Um, Mike Williams has big playability, and Justin Herbert has shown to been throwing the ball to has been showing the willingness to throw the ball deep to Mike Williams, as shown by the most amount of passes thrown 50 plus yards this year. I think he leads the league in that. So he is willing to sling the football. And Keenan Allen has been his massive target hog all year. And if he's healthy and ready to go, I would be totally comfortable starting him as a wide receiver one in this game.
Got it. And then we're coming down to our last 3 or 4 matchups here. We got the Cowboys and the Eagles. On the Eagles side, you have Jalen Hurts. I really don't feel comfortable starting any wide receiver. I don't care how good Jalen Hurts is playing. It's just hard to. He doesn't really have a favorite guy, and so it's very very risky to trust any one of them. I would sit Fulgham, Rieger, Ward, Jeffrey. I don't know who else they have. I wouldn't trust any of them. On the Cowboys side, it's interesting. I think you have Cooper. You have to start him at least as a flex, given the connection he has with Andy Dalton. When it comes to CeeDee Lamb and Gallup, I still lean towards CeeDee Lamb because I do think he'll have a better matchup. But even CeeDee Lamb I don't know if I feel comfortable starting Gallup or Lamb as certainly not a wide receiver 2 as a flex. I think you have better options. I think you're better off starting, I don't know, even Rashard Higgins at flex over someone like CeeDee Lamb. But if you don't have any great options, you think, based on what we've said so far, I think CeeDee Lamb or Gallup is a decent flex to low end flex. You could do better, but certainly not the end of the world if you have either of those guys at flex.
I would consider just one thing. I would consider Cooper to be a decent wide receiver too. Given that he probably has the safest floor and is still the favorite target of any of the Cowboys quarterbacks. So I'd definitely be comfortable starting him as a low end wide receiver too.
I would consider him a wide receiver 2 for sure. Probably towards the low end, I agree. And then we have the Rams and the Seahawks. Seahawks pass defense has been suspect, but they've gotten better, and the Rams were just really shaky against the Jets. What do you think?
So it looks like Dunbar and Trey Flowers are both going to be out for this game. So this Seahawks defense, this pass defense is not going to look good. So I would 100% start Woods and Kupp in this game. I think Woods is definitely going to go off with the lack of Dunbar or Trey Flowers. Kupp, though, I'd say he's a flex. I'd definitely be comfortable starting a flex. He's been pretty good this year, and I can't see. I wouldn't set either of them. I'd definitely be comfortable starting both of them this week. As for Seahawks, you 100% start DK Metcalf. He's been very good all year. Even with Jalen Ramsey, like the last matchup did not go so well. You have to start DK just because of his potential to have a one big gain against, even if it's one catch for like 50 yards. He has that potential to do that. So I would 100% start DK, but I would temper my expectations. He's more of like a wide receiver 2, low end wide receiver 2 is at the Jalen Ramsey matchup. As for Tyler Lockett, he's been very inconsistent, and I am not like too super high on him, but I could see him. He could definitely have a great game, and he is one of the better flex plays, I'd say, at wide receiver. And David Moore, I wouldn't start him. Too volatile. I don't consider him to be a safe option in any way.
Yeah, I agree. I think Tyler Lockett is a decent flex. I don't know if I trust him at wide receiver 2 based on how inconsistent he's been, but Shaq Griffin is still playing, right, for the Seahawks?
Shaquille Griffin is still playing. However, that's still Robert Woods is better than Shaquille Griffin.
Okay.
He will beat that
Yeah.
matchup.
I'd say Cup is going to get the easiest matchup just because Dunbar, I believe, is a slot corner, and so is Trey Flowers. So I'd say Cup is going to have a great matchup. And Woods, I mean, the Seahawks defense, pass defense especially, has been very bad this entire year. So even with them playing, it'd probably be a very good matchup. Yeah, but without them, it should be a no-brainer. And then moving on to what should be a high-scoring matchup, the Titans versus the Packers. On the Titans side, I feel very confident in starting both Corey Davis and AJ Brown, both very strong wide receiver twos, if not wide receiver ones, low end wide receiver ones, even with how amazing they've been playing. Um, I you know I don't know who's going to draw the harder matchup, but I still would feel confident in starting either of them, without a doubt in my mind. And then on the Packers side, Adams, obviously you can lock that in every week. And then with Lazard and Valdez Scantling, you know, as a flex play, I honestly think these are some of the two best flex plays in the league with how bad the Titans secondary is and how much of a high scoring game it should be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think Lazard has the higher floor, but Valdez Scantling has a higher ceiling in that his number one route is the go route. So I could easily see him burning the top of the Titans secondary, getting a 40, 50-yard touchdown. But Lazard is going to get more of those mid-range catches, the 15-yarders, the 10-yarders, along with Devontae Adams, of course. Um, but I would feel comfortable starting all three of them. The latter two at flex, maybe low end wide receiver two, just because of the matchup. Um, and then our last game, hopefully you're still with us. We have the Bills against the Patriots.
So I'll start with the Patriots. So at the Patriots, you don't start anyone. I don't think you ever start. Patriots players are just bad starts in fantasy, any of them. And Jacoby Myers has been decently good in the last few weeks. However, he's getting Tre'Davious White, and that is not a matchup we want for him. And with how little the Patriots already throw, this is not going to be a good matchup for him. None of the other wide receivers even worth considering. There can be boom, but the floor is way too low. The floor is zero for them. So I wouldn't even consider starting any of the Patriots receivers this week against the Bills. As for Bills receivers, Stephon Diggs is a start. With Stephon Gilmore out, I would be, even though he will be getting is it JC
JC
Jackson?
Jackson, yeah.
Yeah,
JC
he is
Jackson.
JC Jackson's very good. He's not Stephon Gilmore though, and uh Stephon Diggs is just a very good receiver as we've seen
Yeah. Unreal
throughout this
season.
year.
Yeah.
And I would 100% be comfortable starting him as like a wide receiver too this week. Cole Beasley is iffy, though he's probably a desperate flex. He's been playing decently well. I wouldn't be that comfortable starting him, but he is a pretty good. He's been having some pretty good games lately, so because of that, I would consider starting him as a flex, a low like the mid to low end flex. No one else I would consider starting this week, other than those two on the Bills.
Yeah. I would say Gabe Davis, he's just too inconsistent. I think as a flex, desperation flex, it wouldn't be the end of the world. I could see that maybe paying off with a touchdown. John Brown is out, I believe. So I think Cole Beasley is a solid wide receiver too for this week. If JC Jackson does do a good job on Stephon Diggs, maybe Josh Allen looks Cole Beasley's way a little bit more. I mean, he already looks his way a lot. So that
Oh
might be a
yeah,
very interesting matchup to watch. So I feel confident even as a wide receiver too, starting Beasley.
oh yeah,
Um, and then
it's
for the
possible.
Patriots side, yeah, I mean Jacoby Myers as a flex is maybe decent because he has a decent floor. Like he'll probably catch 5 balls, no matter what. But the Patriots offense is anemic. It'll be tough, but you could do a lot worse than Jacoby Myers at flex. I think he's I think a top 25 flex, top 20 flex. It's not great, but serviceable. Um, and so there you go. There's our picks for this week. Hopefully, it helps you win your championships. Definitely, like I mentioned, if you have any questions, personal questions about your lineups, leave them in the comments below. I'll be going on Twitter on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, answering questions you guys have, and we'll answer every single question. So definitely leave anything you have. Leave a like on this video. Subscribe if you want to see some more fantasy content next week. Maybe some basketball content, fantasy basketball, or even next season. And look out because sports betting is coming to Michigan, baby. So if you're into that, definitely hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you in the next video.